Welcome to Sports World Have Your Say. I'm Chloe Tilley. This is the place where you can share your thoughts on the weekend's Premier League action. Manchester continues to show its dominance with red and blue hat-tricks. Will any other city get a look-in on the title? Everton fans vent their fury at a lack of spending at the club, but manager David Moyes has faith in his players.
We're the ones who decide how people feel, supporters feel. If we win on a Saturday, supporters go home happy. I need to do that more often, and so do the players.
Stoke and Liverpool, big spenders in the transfer window, but did a dodgy penalty decision cost Liverpool? And is success all in the mind? England manager Fabio Capello certainly seems to think so. Blackburn's Jason Roberts will give us the player's perspective. If you're on Twitter, you can tweet us using the hashtag SWHYS. Whatever your club, we're here to talk about it over the next hour. All of our contact details will be on the screen throughout the programme. The conversation has already been underway for some time at facebook.com/sportsworld have your say. And of course, you can do the old-fashioned thing. You can pick up the phone. You can call us, country code 44 20 70 83 73 33. But first of all, let's get right up to date with the latest news headlines.
A summary of the BBC World News. President Obama has been leading tributes to the nearly 3,000 people killed during the September 11th attacks 10 years ago that led to what former President Bush called the War on Terror. Ceremonies have been taking place in New York, as well as the sites of two more attacks, Pennsylvania and the Pentagon in Washington. Ceremonies have also been held around the world, reflecting the fact people from more than 100 nations were killed in the attacks. In Italy, Pope Benedict held a special mass. President Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria has banned the use of motorbikes in cities, saying they're being used by protesters to move around and perform acts of what it called anti-state sabotage. The use of motorbikes will still be permitted in rural areas. A prominent Iraqi leader who's opposed to the United States has called on his followers to suspend attacks against American troops. The Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr said he wanted to give the Americans a chance to pull out of Iraq by the end of the year, as agreed with the Iraqi government. Police in southeastern England have rescued 24 men believed to be victims of slavery from a gypsy caravan site. The men were living in filthy, cramped conditions, some of which were covered in excrement. Most of the men were from Poland and Romania.
You're watching Sports World Have Your Say. I'm Chloe Tilley. We're joined by Tassos, a Man City fan in Athens, and David, who's a Manchester United fan in New York. But first of all, let's speak to Blackburn's Jason Roberts, who I'm pleased to say has hot-footed it from playing Fulham to join us. Jason, it's good to have you with us again. You're probably hot and sweaty, so I do apologise because you've just literally dashed over 1-1. You happy with the result?
Yeah, I think in the end we've got to be happy with the result. We went 1-0 up. We're disappointed we weren't able to hold it out, but you know, away from home in the Premier League, it's always hard to get a point. So I think we're happy with that and we'll take that. Cracking
first goal by Blackburn.
Yeah, it really was. Ruben Rashini's got that. You see that in training all the time, and it's just great for him to be able to do that in a game. It's just unlucky we weren't able to hold it out.
You're still bottom of the table. Does that worry the club? I know you're always talking about positive mental attitude, something that we'll talk about later in the programme, but does it really play on a player's mind when you are bottom?
Well, when you're 4 games in, I think you tend to look at it that the table hasn't taken shape yet. Of course, it'd be better if you're at the top of the league, but at the same time, we'll take positives from getting a point today at a really tough ground like Fulham, and we'll go away and get ready for the big game against Arsenal coming up.
Well, as we're talking about the Premier League table, let's take a quick look at it now. Throughout the programme, we'll keep swinging back to it. Fascinating at the top, Man United and Man City. You look at the goal difference. Man United scored 15, Man City 12. Huge amount in the first few games of the season. And surprisingly for some, although not everybody, Stoke a 4th. As we say there, Jason's team Blackburn sitting at the bottom of the table. One other thing I want to ask you, Jason, before we move on and talk to our other fans. Junior Hoylett, horrible injury at the end of the game. A clash of heads. Just tell us, do you know how he is?
Yeah, he's fine. I saw him in the dressing room afterwards. He had a bit of a war scar, but you know, that's what happens when you play in the Premier League. He's fine. I mean, he was a little bit disorientated, but he wasn't knocked out, which is important. Yeah, he has got a bit of an open gash there, but he's going to be okay.
That's good to hear. Well, wherever you're watching around the world on BBC World News, you're welcome to get in touch with us as ever. You can pick up the phone, you can call us, country code 44 20 70 83 73 33. Also, you can go to our Facebook page. Lots of you getting in touch with us, facebook.com/sports world. Have your say. Well, let's bring in Tassos, who is a Manchester City fan, and also we can speak to David, who's a Manchester United fan. He is in New York. Welcome both of you to Sports World. Have your say. Amazing weekend Manchester City have had, as well as Man United. Tassos, how are you feeling?
I'm fine, and you? Good evening to all.
Yeah, great weekend for you.
I beg your pardon?
Are you pleased with the weekend results that your team had?
Yes, of course. For all the results until now, I am very proud. We have made a brilliant beginning. We hope that this beginning is going to be continued.
Many people writing Man City off as just big spenders, but a team that can't pull together as a cohesive unit. Certainly Aguero may well put pay to that with a hat-trick.
We have, it is written very much, as you say, that we are big spenders, but I think that if you want to make the best team, you have to spend, because these days the good players are very expensive. So if we have some good players, we have to make a very good team. It is very difficult, but our manager has to prove that he can afford of this. He can afford of win the championship with Manchester City, which is very difficult.
Jason, tell us from a player's perspective, when you see such huge signings over the transfer window, such big money, how does it affect you when you line up to play against a team like Man City? Is it even in your mind?
No, I don't think it is. Obviously, he's a world-class players and they're building a really cohesive unit there. But I think as players, if you start to think about the price tags and, you know, what these players are capable of, I think it would be a negative for you going on the pitch. I think certainly you go out there and you just think it's 11 against 11. We're on the same pitch on merit in that we're Premier League players. So you certainly don't think about what they could potentially do. But they have a very good side. Some of the signings they've made have been fantastic and they are looking like they're going to cause some damage this season.
Let's bring in Dave, who is chairman of the Blue Union. That's the group that organised the protest yesterday at Goodison Park. For people who aren't familiar with that, that's because several hundred Everton fans came out to protest, but many are unhappy with the lack of spending at Everton. Dave, explain to us a little bit more about why so many fans are just so unhappy.
I think there's a feeling of absolute sheer frustration felt within the fan base at Everton. And I think to encapsulate what's happened over the last couple of months, David Moyes and Bill Kenwright, after the Chelsea game last season, quite eloquently assured the fans that we'd be signing players, that they would be signed early and that we would hit the ground running. And I think during the void in the close season, the fan base was actually looking forward to a number of signings coming into the club, into what was already recognised as one of the smaller squads in the Premiership. I think the reality of all that was, once the transfer window actually slammed shut, we actually ended up with more players going out than actually coming in. And I think that's where frustrations have started to boil over, emanating in yesterday's successful protest.
You say many players leaving. Of course, Arteta went to Arsenal. You lost Beckford, you lost Yakubu. Tim Cahill waded into the debate yesterday, saying that perhaps the protest shouldn't have happened. And it's about securing the club for the future. How do you respond to that?
I would warm to the comments made by Tim Cahill and other senior players within the club, and also David Moyes. As late as Friday morning, the Blue Union turned up at Everton's training ground in Finch Farm and actually gave letters of support to the manager and all the players, literally saying that we had absolutely no problems on what was going on within the team on the playing side that our concerns were elsewhere. And that's why we've decided, and we've actually taken the conscious decision, that our protests will be outside the ground, not inside the ground. And quite clearly, that's why we're campaigning under the banner of support the team, but oppose stagnation.
Well, Dave, let's hear the views of the Everton manager, David Moyes.
We're aware of this fans' protest march before the game, but inside the ground, tremendous unity around the club.
I thought the crowd were terrific today. I did. I thought they were right with the team, but I've got to say I think it was the team that gave the crowd something as well. I think the attitude of the players, folk talk about things getting in the way. The players not today. They totally focus on the job. They knew, and I've always said, we're the ones who decide how people feel, supporters feel. If we win on a Saturday, supporters go home happy. I need to do that more often, and so do the players.
David, we heard from Tassos in Greece before, a Man City fan. You as an Everton fan, you're talking about your frustration at a lack of spending. Would you welcome a huge buyer like Man City have had to come in and pump huge amounts of money into your club? Is that your dream scenario?
I think my dream scenario would be for a billionaire Evertonian. I'm not actually advocating, and I don't believe any of the members of the Blue Union are advocating, that Everton Football Club go out and spend large sums of money that we haven't got. And we're actually sensible enough to actually realise that if the short-term business aim within the club is to actually reduce the debt, and unfortunately if the only way they can reduce that debt is by selling senior players, well, so be it. I'm not advocating we don't spend money that we haven't got. I'd like to, and I believe the vast majority of Evertonians out there would actually look for the club to evolve and the club to progress. We're actually looking for evolution, not revolution. Yeah, it would be an ideal scenario if Everton had the riches that Manchester City now have, but I don't think we're being unrealistic. All as we're saying, and it's quite simple, is, and you don't have to go 30 miles up the M62 to Manchester. I think a by far better analogy is what happened at Liverpool Football Club when they actually had the foresight to appoint Martin Broughton as chairman of the club, whereby he went out and he looked for suitable investors and a takeover of the club. And that's what we're actually advocating that Everton Football Club goes out and does, to have hard-nosed businessmen who can actually go out. Because the reality of this is, our protest is probably unlike other protests. We're not actually asking to sack the board. We're not actually asking for the removal of Bill Kenwright. What we're actually saying is, let's be fully focused, let's be fully coordinated, and let's move forward together as one. We're not protesting inside the ground.
So, Dave, you're wanting more money. You're not necessarily saying that you want Kenwright out, but you want more investment in your club. Do stay with us. In a moment, we're going to speak to Hanny, who's a Man United fan, and also to David, who's in New York, another Man United fan. Stay with us here on Sports World. WHYS. We'll carry on speaking in the next few minutes. Hello, welcome back to Sports World. Have your say. I'm Chloe Tilley. Still with us, we've got the Blackburn player, Jason Roberts. If you've got any questions for him, you can post them at our Facebook page, facebook.com/sportsworld. Have your say, and we'll put them to him throughout the course of the programme. Let's cross now to New York and speak to David, who's a Man United fan. Hani, another Man United fan, we'll speak to in a moment from Egypt. David, welcome to the programme. Your reaction to a Rooney hat-trick yesterday, you must be delighted.
Delighted. I mean, the 3 one-touch finishes were just outstanding. You know, he just made each one of those goals look almost elementary. You know, it was nice to see. But he does more than score. He dropped a lot deeper than he has been, but he's also bombarding forward to get into the areas where he can get those touches. So it is fantastic to see.
He's a different player from last season. Jason, as a player yourself, Rooney a lot of last season had his head down. He seemed quite an angry player. This season he seems to be totally different.
Well, I think he channels it. He's a guy who plays, you know, he's always on the line when he's playing. He's very much focusing his energies. And at the moment, he's making the game look so easy. And Dave's right, he's not just a goal scorer. He drops off, he creates opportunities for other people. And he's playing with a different sort of focus at the moment. I think it's helping the teammates he's got around him. They're really taking the pressure off him and allowing him to play in the manner that he is. But what Dave said was right. The way he put those goals away yesterday, it made it look so easy. But believe me, it's not easy to do what he's doing at the moment.
Let's bring in Haim, who is on the line from Jerusalem. You're also a Man United fan. Are you happy with Rooney's performance so far? I don't see how you can't be.
Right, I was going to say, no real way to be displeased with that kind of performance. Just hope it carries on. The question is whether he's going to continue to get the service from the midfield that we've been enjoying recently, especially with Cleverly out now after kind of bad foul yesterday. So that's the worry, is that will the service dry up?
You talk about the worries. Another worry from the blue side of Manchester. How threatened are you feeling by Man City?
I don't know whether it's a question of feeling threatened. I think it's more to do with just recognising that they are now kind of a force. It's horrible to say. We've had so long of enjoying them just not being any good. But we have to recognise that, yeah, they're probably one of our biggest rivals now.
Tassos is still with us from Athens. It's a horrible thought for Haim there in Jerusalem. How do you want to respond?
I think it is better for us not to be threatened, because we have an advantage when our enemy don't think that we can beat him. And I think that the 23rd of October is not too far, when we are going to play together.
David, in New York, how are you feeling about the challenge from Manchester City?
It was inevitable, really. You know, with the money they're spending, you know, what is it, over £300 million on the current squad. You know, when Nasri went, I think that was the player that I thought would change them, because you already had Silva, a left-footed player. Now you throw Nasri. You have to keep aware of both players and where they are around the box, which, you know, it can create havoc for teams, as we're seeing. They're keeping level with us, and we're having one heck of a start to the season. So, you know, it was always inevitable. So,
David, some people watching the screen will see a picture of your back and be somewhat bewildered by it. There's a lot of tattoos on it. Just explain it to us.
Yes, well, it's my dedication to Manchester United. The one is clearly Sir Alex Ferguson. Then you have the United Trinity of Best Law and Charlton. And then you have the Munich clock. For me, those are the three things that I admire most of Manchester United. It's the history and the continued foundation of Manchester United. We're more than just a team, we are a club. And those three elements have, among others, have really propelled us to what we are today.
Jason, just want to get your perspective on the challenge from Manchester City and Manchester United again. As a player, who do you think the greatest challenges are going to come from at the end of the season for the title?
I think obviously Man United are going to be up there. They've achieved what they've achieved over a long period of time and have shown that they know how to win games and know how to win titles. But the key threat is coming from Man City. There's no doubt about that. The players they've brought in. Last season, I thought there was a little bit defensive in the way they set up and their mentality going into games. But you could see that was just a building block for Mancini. And the players he's brought in now are players that can score, they can rotate positions, and you're never quite sure where the attacks come from. You see Zeko's gone into another level of form, and you've got the likes of Aguero and Tevez and these guys to come in, so Balotelli as well. So it's an exciting time for Manchester football in general. I think there's no doubt that Man City are the guys that Man United are going to have to look out for.
Some people would argue that it's more than just the red and blue side of Manchester that are going to challenge. Certainly lots of Chelsea fans have been getting in touch on our Facebook page and saying so. Let's speak to Beth, who's on the line from Fort Worth in Texas. She's a massive Chelsea fan. Beth, do you think it's fair to write off the other clubs this early?
I don't think it's fair to write off half the league. I think there's football's just what it is. I mean, you can hit a rash of injuries. You can have people just, you can run a bad spell. There's a lot of things that can happen. I don't think anybody should be written off.
And what about the Torres dilemma? Lots of people talking about the fact £50 million signing last season, sitting on the bench looking pretty fed up yesterday. Do you have worries that maybe he's not the man to fire you forward?
I've never been a big Torres fan to begin with. He's not the kind of player that I like. Roman's got money. If he doesn't have anything better to do with £50 million, I guess that's his business, isn't it?
Be nice to be able to waste £50 million in your view. Let's hear from the Chelsea boss.
During the 90 minutes, of course, the goal that Sunderland scores creates a little bit of an edge to the game in the final minutes, because they started believing and they were forcing everything. But throughout all of the other period, we were dominant and we had the most share of possession, the most share of opportunities. We played particularly well today and pretty happy with the display of everybody.
Beth, your response?
I think I'm not going to ever argue with AVB. That's not who I am. I'm a Chelsea supporter. So I think there's only been one manager in the last 10 years that I've ever argued with, and I'll leave that name off. So,
Jason, what do you make of the whole Torres debate? Some people writing off Alan Hansen, the former Liverpool player, saying that maybe his best has now passed. What do you think?
I don't agree with that. I definitely wouldn't write him off. What I would comment on is the fact that having a £50 million player on the bench who's not happy can be destabilising, because he's going to be a big player. He's going to be a big personality in the dressing room. And you saw his face on the bench the other day. He wasn't happy. He's not happy with the situation. So my issue is not so much that he's on the bench, but how is he going to react to that, and how is he going to be around the place? Because if people are seeing him with a glum face and a sort of a negative attitude, that's something that could reflect on the other players.
Tassos, do you think that Chelsea could still pose a threat this season?
Of course, I think that Chelsea has the same opportunities with Manchester City, Manchester United to win the championship. I think that they are a new team. They have a new coach, and it is too early to say that it is out of the race of winning the Premier League. About Fernando Torres, he couldn't have forgot the football, and I think that he's become again the Torres that we have admired in Liverpool.
And Haim, what do you think about the challenge from Chelsea?
I mean, you can't write them off. They've been a strong force for quite a few years now. They've got the money. They've got a great squad. I think they were very unlucky to hit a bad spot out of nowhere last season. I don't know really what happened, but we were all expecting them to be much stronger challengers last season. I think this season, if they can make all the bits play together, then they've still got an amazingly strong squad. On paper, I don't think they're any weaker than ourselves or City. I think a lot will depend on Drogba more than Torres. I think that he's been, more consistent for them over a longer period of time, and I hope very, very much that he's fine after this concussion, that everything's okay.
And Jason, briefly, for Chelsea, what do you think is a realistic end to the season? Do you think they could challenge for the title?
I think they can challenge. I think they'll probably take third place right now. They're in transition, so it'll be interesting to see how they can do it. But for me, they're going to need to add to the team in the window.
Absolutely. Lots of people saying that they didn't add enough during the transfer window, not buying, and Chelsea fans wanting more. Well, this brings this edition of World Have Your Say to a close. We will carry on speaking in our next edition in the next few minutes. Jason Roberts is going to stay with us, get your questions into us, and we'll speak to you in a few minutes. Welcome to Sports World Have Your Say. I'm Chloe Tilley, where you decide what we talk about at the end of the weekend's Premier League action. Stoke and Liverpool both spending big in the transfer window, but some would say it came down to little more than dodgy penalty decisions. West Brom earned their first league win of the season against Norwich, and is football won and lost in the mind? England boss Fabio Capello certainly thinks so. So should footballers be employing the services of psychologists like in other sports? If you're on Twitter, you can tweet us using the hashtag SWHYS. Whatever your Premier League club, we're here to talk about it for the next half an hour. All of the contact details are on the screen throughout the programme. The conversation is underway at facebook.com/Sports World Have Your Say. And as ever, you can do the old-fashioned thing and pick up the phone. You can call us, country code 44 2070 83 73 33. But first of all, let's get right up to date with the latest news headlines.
A summary of the BBC World News. President Obama has been leading tributes to the nearly 3,000 people killed during the September 11th attacks 10 years ago that led to what former President Bush called the War on Terror. Ceremonies have been taking place in New York, as well as the sites of two more attacks, Pennsylvania and the Pentagon in Washington. Ceremonies have also been held around the world, reflecting the fact people from more than 100 nations were killed in the attacks. In Italy, Pope Benedict held a special mass. President Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria has banned the use of motorbikes in cities, saying they're being used by protesters to move around and perform acts of what it called anti-state sabotage. The use of motorbikes will still be permitted in rural areas. A prominent Iraqi leader who's opposed to the United States has called on his followers to suspend attacks against American troops. The Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr said he wanted to give the Americans a chance to pull out of Iraq by the end of this year, as agreed with the Iraqi government. Police in southeastern England have rescued 24 men believed to be victims of slavery from a gypsy caravan site. The men were living in filthy, cramped conditions, some of which were covered in excrement. Most of the men were from Poland and Romania.
This is Sports World Have Your Say. I'm Chloe Tilley. Let's turn our attention now to the Stoke-Liverpool game. Many people talking about those dodgy penalty decisions. Some people saying that they were right, others terribly unhappy. Let's cross to Hans now, who is in Denmark. He's a Liverpool fan. Hans, let's talk about that first of all. What did you make, first of all, of the Stoke penalty and then the two that were turned down for Liverpool?
I think it was a poor penalty that they got there, and we were maybe two penalties we never given, so it was a bad decision from a judge.
The argument is, though, I mean, Jamie Carragher was all over the Stoke player, and yes, I know some people would say that those aren't always given, it happens week in, week out, but the best thing to do is for Jamie Carragher not to put his arm around the player if he doesn't want to give away a penalty.
Yeah, for sure, you're right there, but also if you see the Stoke player, he falls very easily, so it's a cheap penalty.
Let's bring in Gareth, who is in Stoke in England. He is chairman of Stoke City Forum. Cheap penalty, we hear there from Hans. What do you make of the Stoke penalty?
Well, I think Jamie Carragher was clearly got his left arm all over Jonathan Walter's shoulder. Jamie Carragher was falling to the ground, so obviously the momentum was pulling Jonathan Walters back. I mean, he was impeding him. It's that's the the start, finish and end of it, so it's a penalty.
And what about Liverpool's two appeals that were turned down?
I can see the point with Rory Delap, but then again, he's jumped up and to get ahead of it, and the ball's just struck his hand. I think it was more ball to hand. But as for the Matthew Upson incident, I don't see how anybody could have got their hand out of the way. I mean, the cross came in, he actually deflected off his foot and took the ball on a completely different path and hit his hand. So, I don't see how he could have got his arm out of the way at all.
Hans, was it hand to ball or ball to hand?
It was ball to hand, no doubt. But the penalty I'm talking about is in the first half, where one Stoke player is coming very late to Martin Skirtle with his and nothing giving there. So it's that's a penalty I'm talking about. The two others, I mean, that is a ball to hand.
Jason, as a Premier League player, how frustrating is it for you when you think it's a cast iron penalty and it's just not given or not seen?
It is very frustrating. Obviously, there's a bit of grey area around the penalties that were given and not given yesterday. With the Carragher one, you see that happen week in, week out. And the issue is, if it's not given in one situation, why is it given in another situation? Even though referees, they have their own viewpoint on things, they won't all agree. But Carragher was certainly a little bit foolish to have his hands around Waters the way he did. And Waters, being a striker, knew what he was doing, going down a little bit easily. So you can tell the frustration there. But what a lot of people haven't spoke about is the credit they have to give to Stoke, because I thought they were fantastic. I thought Liverpool were very unlucky, but a lot of credit for Stoke for doing such a great job on a very, very good side.
Jason, tell us how difficult it is to go to the Britannia Stadium, because Tony Pulis has done a fantastic job in the last couple of seasons, really turning it into what some people may even call a fortress.
Yeah, without a doubt, he's done a great job there. But what many people may not know is how intimidating it is to go to the Britannia. It's always been that way, even when they were lower in the leagues. It's always a hard place to go to. The fans always on top of you. They support their team right the way through. So it is a hard place to go to anyway. And then the team the team he's assembled, is quite an expensive team, but it's a very good side, which play to a certain pattern of play that he's very, very strong on. So it's a hard place to go. You know you're going to get the ball in the box. And with the likes of Crouch and Jones and these kind of players, Waters, you're going to have a tough time.
Well, let's hear it from both of the managers. Let's start with the Liverpool manager, Kenny Dalglish.
We were pleased with what we could control, what part of the game we could control, other than finishing anything off that we had. But there's other factors that come in there as well. That's 4 games we've played now in the Premiership, and every game there's been a contentious decision, refereeing decision, and they've always gone against us. So I do my very best to be respectful and to the Referees Association, or whatever they call themselves now. I'm finding it more and more difficult.
We're pleased, it was windy today and it was difficult conditions, and Liverpool played very, very well at times. But we defended well. We threw, we got bodies in the way. That little spell in the, just after an hour was typical of what this football club's all about. And that is people throwing their, bodies in the way to stop the ball from going in the back of the net. And we have to improve our passing today, and our decision making at times was poor. We're better than that, but you couldn't fault the effort and commitment.
Kenny Dalglish feeling somewhat victimised at the moment. Tony Pulis happy with his team's performance. Gareth, I'd be interested to get your views. Some respected commentators saying today Stoke in 4th position at the moment in the league table, and saying that it could actually end that way. End of the season, Stoke in 4th. Do you think that's realistic?
I mean, any position's attainable, really. Sky's the limit, really. But we're fighting on a different front. We haven't been in a European competition for over 30 years. There's going to be a bit of a fixture pile up Thursday, Sunday for a long while yet. So we'll just see how the squad holds up in terms of fitness and injuries and suspensions. But realistically, if you ask me, I think probably we're going to be, I would say, within the top 10 definitely. And if we were above Arsenal, that would be even better.
You say you're delighted, obviously, with being in Europe, but do you worry it can be a bit of a distraction?
I mean, it can. I mean, everybody saw what happened to Fulham. It's like another half a season if you get all the way. Fulham did really, really well and got into the Europa League. And then obviously the fixture pile up, and they had a few injuries as well, and they seem to plummet down the table quite considerably, really.
Jason, do you think it's realistic Stoke 4th?
No, if I'm being honest, I don't think it is realistic. I think it's a very good side, a side that's going to cause people a lot of problems. I think it's right to view them as a top 10 side and maybe pushing on from there. But I think Tony Pulis wouldn't say that they'd be ended up in fourth. Of course, he'd be happy if that was the case. But I don't see that, if I'm honest with you.
We've still got Dave with us, who's an Everton fan. He helped organise the protest yesterday at Goodison Park. Dave, when you look over to the likes of Stoke, they're spending money, they're doing well. How do you feel?
Incredibly frustrated, to be honest with you. I think Evertonians are incredibly philosophical, and I think we're realists, and we probably compete at the upper end of that middle tier, of the middle three. We're not particularly going to break into the Champions League positions, and we're not going to be down in the relegation places. And ultimately, I think that the likes of Stoke and yesterday's opponents, Aston Villa, are our peers. They are our competitors, and the frustration stems from the likes of Stoke actually outbidding us and investing considerable amounts of money into the playing squad. And similarly, you go to the Britannia Stadium, and it's a brand new stadium. It's commercially set up quite nicely. They appear to have a business plan. We don't appear to have any of them at the moment, and that's where the frustration comes from.
Is the problem that Everton have just overachieved over the last few years? David Moyes has done a fantastic job with very, very little budget to play with, and maybe fans are just expecting too much?
No, but I don't think at all. It's somewhat ironic sitting here listening to the two clubs from Manchester and having a debate and listening to the debates about them dominating the Premiership at the moment. I enjoyed that in the 80s, and Everton, whether people like it or not, Everton are a remarkably big club, the fourth most successful team in English football. We've spent more seasons in the top flight than any other club in English football, and Evertonians have become sick and tired of being portrayed as being plucky little Everton. Haven't they done well? Well, whether the media likes it or not, Everton actually see themselves as a big club. We're one of the heavyweights of English football, not plucky little Everton.
So you're a big club, you're a heavyweight of English football. Dave, stay with us. Jason Roberts, the Blackburn player, is staying with us till the end of the programme. We're just going to take a quick break and we'll carry on talking in the next few minutes. Welcome back to Sports World Have Your Say. I'm Chloe Tilley. Let's turn our attention now to Arsenal Swansea City. Arsenal winning 1-0 yesterday. Let's bring in Seb, who's an Arsenal fan who joins us on the line from Lima in Peru. Seb, your reaction to what must have been a difficult game after last week's 8-2 result?
Yes, it was a kind of interesting game because we have the chance of seeing our new players and how they interact with each other, and I think that the three of them passed the test. I think Mikel Arteta had a good performance, good passing, good timing, and Mertesacker was also solid. And I think that if Jose Mourinho can stay fit all the season, he can be a massive signing for us.
So you're happy with the signings, because some people are unhappy when Fabregas left, saying they were panic buys.
Yeah, okay, I think that this was the turn to Cesc Fabregas to return to his country, but I think that it's gonna took a while time for Mr. Wenger to find the correct lineup, and I think Mikel Arteta or Aaron Ramsey can afford this place.
And what about the issue of confidence with Arsenal? Lots of people suggesting that confidence is incredibly low. Does that worry you as a supporter?
Well, we all trust in Mr. Arsene Wenger of the 15 years he has been at the club, and I think that we can't make a conclusion today about yesterday's match because it was the first game with the new additions, and I think that we have 4 youngsters under 21 years that played yesterday, and I think that with a step by step, I think they can make an impact as well as the new additions. I think that Jose Mourinho and Mikel Arteta can afford the place that left Samir Nasri and Cesc Fabregas.
Jason, how difficult is it to play in a team where confidence is low?
It's really tough, obviously. It's hard when you're viewing things in a negative sort of way, and I think that the feeling around the club at the moment, Arsenal that is negative. I think the issue of Arsene Wenger is very divisive amongst the fans, but I think they have to stick with him. I'm a big fan of him and what he's done. What's interesting to me is the budget that they have there, and it was being reported that Arteta took a pay cut to go there, and it seems that Arsenal's business model is very different to many of the other clubs competing up the top of the table. So Arsenal may have to be patient because they are in transition and they have a very young side. So progressing from here is going to take some money, and it's interesting to see if they're going to spend it.
Jason, whose responsibility is it to sort out confidence? Obviously, a player has responsibility, and the management. How do you move it forward? How do you breed confidence if you're losing week in, week out?
Well, the only way to breed confidence is to win. Without getting those 3 points on the board, you're always going to feel negative about the situation. It's a results business we're in. At the same time, you can keep it positive around the training ground. You can keep the training upbeat, and the manager can go out and defend these players and try to keep the pressure away from them. But at the same time, the only way you feel good about being a footballer is by winning. And without that happening, it's always going to be tough.
Well, let's speak now to a Norwich fan who joins us from New York. Cesar is on the line. Welcome to the programme, Cesar. A loss today.
Yeah, it's a tough game, but it's early in the season, and the one thing about Norwich, though, they've been playing well. The only thing is, I just see with the team does that they've yet to find their flow. They're able to move the ball well, they're able to defend well. I felt Declan Rod did a great job at goalkeeping, considering he's a rookie. I just think that with the next few games, it's going to be a bit tough, but. We're just, for right now, though, we're just not getting the calls our ways, but I believe that'll change in time.
Tell us how you became a Norwich fan living in New York.
Oh, man. The thing with the United States, though, is that the status quo of following the Premier League, you're either a Manchester United, a Chelsea, an Arsenal, as of late, Manchester City, and Liverpool. Great teams. I love their tradition, but for me, I wanted to follow a team that really had to fight to get to the Premier League. I want to follow a team where the fans are passionate, where the fans are loyal. So one weekend, I ended up basically just researching this year's team. And when I read about Norwich, read about their history, read about, it's fantastic that On the Ball City is the oldest football song. And just reading about the efforts that Leah Smith has done, for me, I knew this was the team I wanted. And as well as interacting with the Norwich fans, great fans. They've made me feel at home.
Jason, I can see you nodding there. Is that encouraging to hear?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it's easy to go with the status quo and support the teams that are winning. But Norwich is a fantastic club. I mean, you go down there, it has great roots, has a great youth system as well. It's a club I really like. I'm on how Norwich are doing the Premier League. It's very tough because you all come away from games thinking we've played well, we've created a few chances, but it's hard to get the decisions going for you when you're a new team in the Premier League. And also, it's so easy to lose games that you've played well in when you're playing against what are very, very good technical sides in the Premier League.
Well, let's get the views of the Norwich boss, Paul Lambert.
I thought he's been caught, and as I said, when that happens in a penalty box and you're hoping one of the officials see it, they never saw it. But it's, when you look at it in tape, then you certainly know he's been hit.
Roy Hodgson's take on it is obviously there was contact, that was indisputable, but he didn't feel it was any intent or a deliberate act.
I haven't spoken to Roy after it, and as I said, I've saw it on the tape numerous times, and yeah, we'll see.
Cesar, your reaction?
It was frustrating, seeing the thing with the officiating, I don't want to criticize the officiating because I felt that Norwich had enough opportunities to score. But at the same time, though, if you're going to call the game, I hope that I hope the officials start calling it both sides. I mean, it's ridiculous that after four games, 4 straight penalty kicks, and then today what happened with Vaughan, it's just ridiculous. Especially you see the man bleeding, obviously, and then a few minutes afterwards you see Morrison getting mugged, and there's not a call on that.
Jason, when you're in the thick of it, when you're on the pitch, when the referee or the linesman makes a terrible decision, what you're trying to convey that you're irritated. You don't want to go up it straight in their face. What do you do? How do you deal with it?
Well, it's tough, obviously. In most situations, you have the opportunity to speak to the referee, and it's many times it's not done in the correct manner. It's quite, you're heated and you're saying things maybe that, you know, in a cold sort of blood you wouldn't normally say. But at the same time, you know, it's very tough. You see decisions go against you, something that means so much to you, the supporters, the fans, your fellow players. It's hard to deal with, and you know, of course, respect has to be shown. But at the same time, you want some consistency, and it's very tough when you feel that you're not getting that.
Well, Jason, I want to talk to you a little bit about the psychology of the game. Lots of people who will have seen the England game this week will have seen Fabio Capello touching his head, saying it's all in your head, it's all in your head, players. And then I know that for people who've read an article which is in the Telegraph newspaper today, you've been quoted as talking about the need for psychologists within the game and the fact that football is so far behind so many other sports. Just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, football's progressed so much in terms of column inches, in terms of financial sort of ramifications of what could happen. Last year with Blackburn Rovers, we could have been relegated, and that would have cost the club up to £50 million to be relegated from the Premier League. Now, that's a big deal. You can't go onto the pitch thinking about things like this, or you wouldn't be able to play. I mean, at some clubs, they are a bit more progressed than other clubs, and they do have psychologists, they have people to come in and speak to you about the situation. But it's tough because if you go out there thinking about the fact that people could lose their jobs, there's £50 million on the line here, it can be an issue. You try to focus on the game and just focus on the things you can affect, and always try to remain positive, because if you start to get negative and start to feel bad about a situation, it's hard to go out and perform.
You say that some clubs do have psychologists there on hand, but in a dressing room situation, I mean, lots of people just think it's such a macho environment. Would your teammates look down on you if you said, actually, mate, I want to go and see a psychologist?
Well, no. I mean, at Blackburn, we've had psychologists working with us, and they deal with everyone on a personal sort of basis. They come and see you personally. But the biggest psychologist is the manager. He's the one who puts things to you and sort of tries to cajole the sort of feeling of the dressing room. And it's always good to have that positive sort of atmosphere on it. And now, especially with footballers earning so much money, sometimes they have to be motivated in a different way. It's not so much always a stick. Sometimes it has to be the carrot. But I think that players are realising that they have to have their mind right if they're going to go and play in such extreme situations.
Dave's still with us, who's the Everton fan, obviously also an England fan in Liverpool. Dave, do you agree with what Fabio Capello is saying, that a lot of England's problems is in their mind?
Yeah, I think there's probably quite a lot of frustration, particularly the dividing line so fine at the upper echelons of the Premiership, Champions League and international football. And clearly you'd only have to look at the difference between Wayne Rooney now to the Wayne Rooney of last season. It's a totally different player, and you can actually see the growl and scowl on Wayne Rooney of last season seems to be incredibly happy, seems to be incredibly at ease with himself, and as such that's reflecting in his general all-round play. You can actually see he's enjoying going out onto the pitch. He's actually enjoying his football.
Hans, you're a Man United fan. Pick up on that about Rooney. We've lost that line, unfortunately. Jason, one thing I wanted to pick up, I was watching the US Open semi-final yesterday, Federer versus Djokovic, and there was a really interesting moment when Federer was serving. He had 2 match points, and Djokovic sort of pulled a face and looked at some point like he was mocking the crowd. He did an amazing return and blatantly got under the skin of Roger Federer. He then lost those 2 match points and went on to losing the match. And for me, it was a critical moment when psychology was absolutely paramount in such an important game for them.
Well, it can be, and especially in tennis where it's a one-on-one sport. But I think in football the same thing applies. You know, if you can get one over the person you're competing against, maybe take them down the line, outdo them for pace or outdo them for strength, and that's something that's going to stay with them. So there is subtle ways you can try to get into the opponent's head, because it's as much about that psychology and that relationship as it is about the way you view it and the way you view yourself. So if you can do something to affect the opposition all within the rules of the game, then that's all part of it as well.
And Seb, as an Arsenal fan, some people say your team has a fragile mental state.
Well, I think that we have many youngsters that we kind of have a lack of experience. But I think with the new additions, we can afford big challenges that in the forthcoming weeks. And we have Robin van Persie, who is now the captain, and he's very experienced. And we have Mr. Wenger, who can talk all the youngsters to improve their game and be patient, because we know this is only the beginning for this season.
Okay, Seb, I'm going to have to jump in at this point because we're coming to the end of the programme, but thank you for joining us on the line. Thank you also, as ever, to Jason Roberts, Blackburn's Premier League player. That's all from Sports World Have Your Say for this week. We'll be back at the same time next week. I hope you can tune in then. Thanks ever so much for watching.